We should be live now. Um, my name is Ed Beasley, and this is a new show for my channel called Comics Are Rad. It's a celebration of all things comics because comics are rad, and we should talk about them. And got special guest Ryan here today,
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
and we're going to be talking about comics and what we've been buying, what we've been reading, what we're looking forward to, movies, all that kind of stuff. Oop, there you go. I was just going to check if the stream was live, but I got the alert just as it went live. Usually it happens towards the end of the stream, about an hour and a half in.
Well, it's got to keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
So tonight's all about keeping Ed on his toes.
Mm. We had a lot of trouble trying to get the audio to work before the show. So hopefully it is working for everyone watching. But now that we're live and we think you guys can hear us, we will go to Ryan and let's see what you've been buying. What's on the two read list.
Yeah, for sure. So I picked up a couple of books that I'm keen to. Some of them are first time reads, and others are just things I needed to add to my collection. So the first one that I picked up recently is Savage Land Rogue. They decided to take the issue, I think it's Uncanny X-Men 174, where Rogue and Magneto in the Savage Land, and everyone loves Savage Land, everyone loves Savage Land Rogue, so they decided let's investigate that period of time a little bit more. So they've gone back, and I think it's a six-issue mini that they're doing that is set during that time in the Savage Land. So it's like set during those events of like Uncanny X-Men 174. So I'm super keen to get stuck into it. I tend to, with some of these minis, I tend to wait until I get like all six issues before I actually sit down and read it. But this one I was particularly happy to get because it's the J. Scott Campbell variant cover, and you know, it's got Kazar, Nick Fury, Magneto, and Rogue on the cover. So it's pretty happy with that one. I think I've got issue two and three waiting for me at the comic book store right now. Um, I also picked up this great copy of
Oh,
X-Men 104.
nice.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Dave Cockrum.
Mm,
So, um, Dave Cockrum cover. This is the issue where um, for people who are familiar with the what was happening in the X Men at this time, prior, Magneto had been basically aged down to being a baby, and this issue X Men 104 is sort of Magneto's triumphant return to challenge the X Men. So we find out that Eric the Red has regenerated Magneto to be perhaps even more powerful than he ever was prior. And it sort of kicks off that new era of Magneto being sort of the Omega level threat to the X Men once more, all the way through, oh man, I think all the way through to like X Men 150 at this point, where he has his fight with the X Men again, and Kitty Pryde gets injured. And he sort of starts to second guess what his role is as a villain and whatnot. But I mean, if anyone ever watched me on recent reads, you all know I'm a huge Magneto guy. So
mm,
um, it's a book I just had to have in my collection. Opportunity came up to grab like a a pretty crispy copy, so I had to add it to the collection. Um, One I've never read, which I've also picked up, is Wildcats
Oh, cool.
#1. I'm also a Jim Lee guy, so I've read all Jim Lee's Uncanny X-Men and X-Men stuff, little bits of his DC work like Hush and whatnot, but have not read anything that he's done with Image. So keen, keen to give it a read. Love the artwork already. Love the cover. Like I knew I was going to love it because I love Jim Lee's work. Yeah, so interesting to see, you know, what 30 years after the fact, like what the hullabaloo was,
Mm.
like these all these legendary creators now, they all walked out on Marvel, and it's like, was it this is to me now, it's like, was it worth it? Let's have a look at this book. Let's have a bit of a check and see, was it good? We'll see. And then little other bit for my collection that I picked up. I also collect like art and sketches and things like that. So I jumped on a sketch list for Walt Simonson,
Oh, sick.
and I picked up this sketch cover.
Wow.
Yeah, so pretty thrilled. Never thought I'd be able to get an original Walt Simonson because God knows I can't afford the pages. Um, so yeah, this opportunity came up. I took a gamble. Um, I had no idea what the finished result was going to look like for the money that I did pay, um, but super happy with it. So yeah, very exciting. That's probably been my main pickups lately. Um, Apart from like I've got some standing order stuff. Like I'm currently reading World's Finest. I've been on World's Finest, the Mark Waid Batman Superman title since #1, mainly because I was a huge fan of the Dan Mora artwork. I think Dan Mora is off the book now, but I'm still hanging on to see.
Mm.
I'm so deep into it now. If it's only going to be like a 50 issue run or something, I've already done like 35 issues, so I'm kind of like I want to stick it out and see how long it goes for. Um, yeah, that's been my that's what I've bought. Um, haven't done as much reading. I've been so a friend of mine, we wrote a play together over the course of, I believe, 4 or 5 months towards the end of
Cool.
last year. And it actually premieres at the Moreton Bay Anywhere Theatre Festival this Friday. So we've sort of been deep into that process, and it's taken up most of my free time. So I haven't really got, I've got a to read pile that's, I don't know, 2 feet high at the moment, that I need to get cracked into. But the time is coming up where I'm actually going to get to do that. So I'm kind of excited to dig through the treasures.
That's awesome. What's the play called?
It's called Bawdy Tales and Critical Fails, a role play adventure.
Cool.
Yeah, so we sort of took Chaucer's Canterbury Tales and Dungeons and Dragons, and we smashed them together into maybe some sort of weird Dungeons and Dragons early modern theatre cabaret. So it's got songs, dances, all sorts of wild stuff. Um, so if anyone is watching, if you're in the Brisbane area, jump on anywhere.is. You can still get tickets. So it's this Friday and Saturday, and then next Friday. So yeah, exciting time.
That's awesome. So that the old X-Men comic, if you don't mind, how much was that? Or if just was it expensive or
Oh, it was 100, I think. Um, a I saw it posted um, up for sale in one of the collector groups that I'm in,
okay.
and Um, it was one of those weird times where it's like I didn't have the money at the time, but I knew that I was going to, so I just sent the guy a message and was like, I don't know if you still have this in like a month, like I do want to buy it from you. And he was super chill about it. He was like, I'm not going to hold it for you, but I'm not necessarily going to actively advertise it as being available. So um, I sent him a message like a month later. I was like, "You still got that book? Is it still available?" And he was like, "Yep." Like, just one of those, like, in some collector groups, like, once you've been around them for a while, there's just some really good dudes in those groups as well. Like, they're not looking to make obscene profit. Like, if you're part of, like, the little collector group and they've got something that you're chasing, like, most of the time, they're willing to, like, do you a pretty solid deal. So I'd probably say this is probably like an 8, maybe an 8.5 if you would like to get it CGC graded, for example. So, I mean, I did no research about it, to be honest. I saw the cover. Books with a yellow cover are also notoriously hard to get nice copies of. Like, yellow just got obliterated in the printing process with like scuffs and marks and aged like relatively roughly over time. But it's got nice sharp corners, only a few like very, very minor spine ticks. But other than that, like it's one of the nicest copies of um, 104 that I've seen available that wasn't already graded. And you know, I do grade books from time to time, but it's not like the be all and end all of buying comics for me. Like 95% of my collection is just raw books, like they're not graded. So it was more important to me to just have like a copy than it was to
Mm.
like be the type to be like, well, I only want a copy if I can get it CGC and a 9.8 and blah 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 blah. Um, it's like cool if you got the money for that, great. But yeah, I'm just happy to have the book because I've wanted one for a while.
So
I've sort
you're
of got
gonna
the
open it and read it?
yeah. I plan on reading it because I've done I collect the Epic collections as well. So I mean, I have this comic, I have this available to read and stuff like that. But I'm sure you probably agree that even like reprints aren't quite the same experience as cracking open a book that was printed in 1977.
Mm.
Uh, so, you know, you break this open, it's the original paper, it's original ink. Like the color is exactly how contextually it was meant to be seen in 1977. So, plus you get that old comic smell that just can't be
That's what I was gonna
replicated.
say.
Yeah.
That it smells awesome.
It's had a life. It's had a whole life before it came to me.
Mm. Just some kid
Um,
would have bought that in the 70s and read it and stashed it away and
and
it
that's the
escaped
thing.
getting thrown out by the parents. And
When you think of like no one was buying these books in the 70s thinking, oh, I'll be able to sell it for a profit in
mm,
50 years' time. Like like I think like 1977, this book is like 40 oh man, I'm so bad at math. It's like
be
48 years old
45,
or 45 years old. But yeah, that's
no, 40, 47.
like that's
Yeah.
crazy. Like this book is so tidy. Like to have to be in the condition that it's at and be like older than me. You know, I love it. It's what I like about. Um, it's like what I like about collecting. It's like this. It's actually not necessarily always about owning the thing, but it's also like you say, that whole idea of like the journey that that thing has been on to still even
Mm,
be here. And I know that when I was like a kid, and I used to get comics from like the newsagents, like even in like the 90s. Like for most of them, like I kept my favorites, but then even then I was not keeping every book that I have had got my hands on. Like I would still throw them away, I would fold them up, mistreat them, and then, you know, gems like this, like probably old enough to be my own father and still here.
It's a year older than me, in better condition than I am.
And that makes me, I remember seeing, I think CGC posted a video of it at San Diego Comic Con last year. One of the best preserved collections of Marvel key issues was presented to them for grading, like on the show floor. Someone just came up with like a box full of comics, and they had like multiple copies of like Amazing Fantasy 15, multiple copies of Fantastic Four #1, multiple copies of X-Men #1. And these books were all like 9.0 plus.
Right.
Like these were books where, I think the person who, if I remember the story correctly, I think the person who presented them the CGC was like, oh yeah, my dad bought these brand new off like the news rack when he was young, and he put them in a shoebox and then he put them away, like specifically. Like these have never been read, they've never been opened. Like these are maybe, unless people have got some gems hidden out there, they were maybe like the last of the pristine sort of copies that we'll probably ever see. Like everything else has probably already been graded and sold, and all that sort of stuff. So really cool stuff.
That's awesome. And, that Wildcats #1, that's the comic book that, after all my friends flaked on me for drawing my first comic, I was copying, figures out of Wildcats #1, and that's when I realized that maybe I could draw.
That's
So
awesome.
that book is the reason why I'm making comics today.
Oh, that's great. That's going to give me like a new perspective, like when I give it a read as well. Um, did you watch the cartoon? Did you watch the very short-lived Wildcats animated series?
No,
It was okay. Like it had that um, 90s animation sort of, that same sort of look that X-Men and Spider-Man and those sort of high-end animations were going for at the time. Just the characters didn't really resonate with people, I think, but I remember it being pretty cool. That could just be there's this young me with filled with nostalgia, maybe.
was it on TV here?
I believe it was like they showed it like morning TV, so it was one of those like episode of Dragon Ball Z, episode of Wildcats, episode of something else like before school, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think that it came out, but it sounds like it did. Mm.
It must have either, or maybe it was a fever dream. I'm not sure.
I'll show you guys what I've been buying. There's on the weekend it was my 6th anniversary to for getting married to my lovely wife Robbie, and we went down to what's it called, Wonthaggi in like this east of Victoria, and it's this little small country town. It's about 2 hours out of Melbourne, and the little thing of shops is there's like 4 op shops. There's 2 secondhand shops, a secondhand bookshop, and then we did that on the Saturday, and then on the Sunday we went to the Conwack Market, which is a like a Sunday market, and I think it's the only thing basically in Conwack, as far as I can tell. And then there's an antique store, and then another secondhand shop. like on the strip that's like at that place. So we went around there, and I was looking for comic books and video games, and I found White Bikes. I got the first four, and this was a series by Will Spicaccio, and he was one of the Emmy founders. But this book didn't come out until '94 because just as they were starting up Image, his sister died, and so he wasn't ready to put the book out, and so I completely missed this one when it was coming out. 'Cause it came out in '94, so it might have been when I was in England and there was no comic shops around where I was. And then by the time I came back to Australia, which might have been in '95, I think it had already run. Excuse me. Yeah, so I completely missed it. I didn't even know that the book had ever actually been released because I used to see the adverts and stuff in other comics, and then yeah, I just never saw it on the shelves, never saw it any back issue bins or anything, and then just came across one, two, three, and four at our little secondhand shop in Montague, so I picked it up, and that's what I read this week too, and it's actually pretty good. The first three issues are written by Brandon Choi, who wrote or scripted the Wildcats. So I think the guys drew the comics first, and then Brandon Choi did the dialogue. And so it's a team book because you know how all the ex guys did team books when they started Image, and it's like the government operatives, and they get screwed over in their first mission, and they get covered in a golden symbiote microorganism, like nanobot stuff. So they've got the golden armor on them, and then the fun bit is instead of like fighting a corporation like Cyberforce or alien demons like Wildcats, they end up fighting vampires. So you can see the position too. And the artwork's really sick too. So Bruce Patashio is like a really sick artist. And it's inked by Scott Williams as well, who was inking Wildcats and Cyberforces around the same time.
Very nice.
It's really good to just to get that little bit of the Image history that I completely missed. And to,
Well, I feel like it's the least talked about of those
mm,
image legend sort of titles. Like everyone knows Spawn, everyone knows Savage Dragon, everyone knows Wildcats and Cyberforce, but that's sort of like the forgotten. Everyone knows like what Youngblood and all those things that Rob Liefeld tried to do. Um, but yeah, I feel like I have seen. I think I used to have. I know I used to have Wetworks number one in my collection like 20 years ago, um, and I don't have it anymore. But it's both. It's also funny that we've both been picking up early image stuff without even like we didn't collude on this. Like this is just chance. Um, but now it's yeah, it definitely has got me curious. It's one of those books. Every time someone brings it up, I think, man, I gotta read Wetworks again.
I think the little 2 year gap also might have helped because he had a bit more time to work on it. So this the storytelling's really good, and the pacing of like how the scenes change and everything's I think better than Jim Lee and Sylvester's like early Image stuff. And because it's like 2 years after the launch of Image, that Brandon Choi would have been writing um, Wildcats and whatever else he was writing, like Gen 13, I think he scripted as well. So his chops were a little bit better by the time they got to this. It really actually feels more like an earlier 90s Marvel comic. It's like he took more um, like cues and stuff from Claremont than the other guys did, because he's adding in characters and subplots and mystery characters. Like every issue, there's some stuff happening, and it's all like the A, B, and C plots that that like stack up like a Claremont kind of uh, like comic.
That is cool.
So it was interesting to look at. And another thing I found was concrete. It's back, but this is concrete. Think like a mountain by Paul Chadwick. And this is another unique book. This is a black and white. I don't know if the actual comics are black and white. I feel like they would be color, but you can see it's like beautiful ink work.
Mm.
But
Really
concrete was
nice.
a. They go ahead.
I was just saying, the artwork's really nice.
Yeah, yeah. Chadwick's really good. I think yeah, so he wrote and drew it, but it was a Dark Horse comic, like in the 90s, and might have even been in the late 80s that it started. But it was um, I should have looked at this before, but I had a picked up the odd concrete comic book like through the years, and always liked it. But it's kind of like an indie comic of the day, like like a Dan Cloud, but it was like mysterious and creepy and stuff. But it's a concrete segue. Like, did something happen, and he got encased in this rock body that's indestructible. So he kind of becomes like a celebrity, and so instead of being like a superhero and just going out and like solving crimes, fighting bad guys, he just kind of wanders around the world and experiences stuff in his new like indestructible body. So it's kind of like an anti superhero, not like anti as in against, but like flipped on its head, kind of like a slice of life. But the guy essentially is a superhero. He has superpowers and stuff. But
It's almost like that time between getting superpowers and figuring out if you actually want to do something with them or you just want to try and keep living a normal life.
mm.
That's cool.
But
I
then
think
you
I
get
resonate to those sort of things the most now. Is like I do still love my superhero stuff, but I don't know. Every time you happen across a book like that now, I find like I'm rereading that stuff more often than I am than going back to like classic superhero stuff, I guess.
but it's that thing that it's recognizable, but it's really different at the same time. Like it's got that thing that you can latch onto, like oh, it's a superhero, but then he just takes it in a completely different direction.
Nice.
But I recommend if you find any concrete books in the wild to pick them up. Ugh. And another one I found was Let Him Have It. Is a big older
Oof.
book, but it's the Battle Picture Library Collections. Just a whole really great um, war stories. And these ones, if you remember the newsagents, they were little, like a size, like digest size books we used to get, and they're mostly told in the 2 panels per page sort of style, and, I got this one just 'cause it's fun to have really giant books, but also, I've been watching a lot of, I always watch a lot of, like, video game stuff on YouTube, and whenever the American people are talking about, Game Boys, they always say, like, oh, for their long trip in the car, they all had Game Boys, you know? But for me, if there was a long trip in the car, I'd get one of these from the my parents would give me one of these from the newsagents because 'cause they're cheap, like, pulled paper, little comic book magazines, and when I was a little kid, they'd take ages to read. And there was this one, um, this Commando, and I think there might have been another one, but they were every newsagents had them in the 80s and probably into the 90s. So it's like either one of them or a Mad magazine I'd get for taking the train out to visit people in the country or something, or driving out.
Were they doing them as like the ones that you're picking up in the 80s and 90s? Because I don't quite remember. Were they doing them as original stories then, or were they largely just publishing reprints? So like the war stories that were being done in like the 40s and 50s, but just reprinting them in like digest style.
I'm not sure because there's a lot of them, so they might have been reprinting old stuff, but it's a very specific format because it's in the whole in the like if you see that page has 2 panels at the top, but it's still in the 2-tier kind of thing. So it's I don't really know anything about the publishing history of any of those books, but there is lots of them like well, this is collection number 2, and it's this big. So, you know, they were into the thousands, like, Phantoms, like, that's up to a really high number, and they were like that in the 80s, I'm pretty sure. They were
Okay.
really high hundreds, and, uh, so, yeah, it's a bit of nostalgia, and it's really cool to have giant books. Ugh, and then another one I got was Dan Dare, and those 2 were from the comic market, and they're both British comics. I think someone who lived there must have been from England who moved there and sold their comics. And they said Dan Dare's from the Eagle comic, and he's like a space captain adventure guy with really nice artwork. And it's like an odd coloring system they've used. It might be watercolors or something, but you'd say the whole like
That's
figures and
very
cities
cool.
or spaceships. Yeah. So in a oh, that's the Eagle logo. That's the Eagle comic books, which was the comic book he was in. So kind of like 2000 AD, but it was older, like more serious, less like like the anachronistic sort of stuff that 2000 AD did. And yeah, I used to get Eagles every now and then when I was a kid. So hey, saw the Dan Dare and I was like, yeah, I'll check that out. And then the last one is Demian, which I think either Spanish or Italian, but I think it's a crime story or something. But the artwork's really good.
Mm.
Because yeah, I always hear about these the the European albums that people always talking about. I never really see them, so I got that one, and I'll have to get the Google Lens out to be able to read it because it's not in English, but it is. awesome. Like look at how they're using the black and white on this page, on this panel. They're framing that guy with the dark, and then you know having him stand out by being coloured in, everything around him in white, and then framing that with the black again. That's good cartooning. So that'd be fun to check out and try and read with the Google Lens.
Very cool. Like I always tell people, um, I don't speak French, but I love Colin Wilson's artwork, and it's a
Mm.
shame that his work is almost exclusively published in France and solely in French nowadays. But I have picked up, copies of Wonderball, copies of Nevada, you know, just because the artwork is so nice. Like it's irrelevant to me sometimes that I can't actually read the story, or it's like you can read the story, but I guess you miss the dialogue because it's so well. A lot of those European ones, like they're such good visual storytellers that you can follow the plot. You just miss the detail because you can't read the
Mm.
dialogue. Yeah,
That's always the goal when drawing a comic book is people should be able to get the gist of it or understand what's going on, like on each page without the dialogue. And we've got Jeffrey's in the chat. Says, "G'day, legends. Comics are rad."
yeah. Comics are rad.
Comics
Agree.
are really, and
Um, One that is on my to read pile, which I haven't dug into yet. I picked up this one too.
oh,
Medusa.
that
Um,
looks cool.
so this one, um, so I remember when I did a episode of Recent Reads and I talked about the Tony Parker uh, graphic novel, This Damn Band, about the
Mm,
rock and roll band from the 60s that acted like they were selling their soul to the devil and then accidentally did. So he uh, wrote and illustrated this one, which is an alternate sort of take on the legend of Medusa, um, where the punchline is sort of everything you knew about Medusa is a lie, and um, she's sort of been brought into a hero sort of lens, and our hope is like, can she be the savior of mankind against like an ancient evil? But the artwork is phenomenal. I'm trying to just find a really nice page to show you. It's like trying to find one that's going to translate well on the screen. We'll go back to.
that looks cool. The color looks nice too.
Yeah, so colored by Tamara Bonvillain, um, who her credits are just growing. Like her credits are growing and growing and growing as the years go on. Published by Dark Horse. I just got this from my local comic book store, so it's like easily available. But I highly recommend it. Even though I haven't cracked into it yet, I highly recommend it just because I've followed Tony Parker like his whole career. I know Tony, his work is always phenomenal. So like I'm happy to blind recommend that to people based on just the fact that I know that he's going to deliver something amazing every time he picks up a pencil. Um, and yeah,
Is that out now, or is
it
it
is out
out?
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's out now, and it's just sort of adding. So Tony's done some phenomenal work for Dark Horse over the past 10 years or so now, And that's just another example of like that renown that he's sort of building and that trust for them to go, you can write it, you can draw it, do what you want, we'll put it out, you know. And I firmly believe that it's just a matter of time before one of the other publishers sees what Dark Horse see in Tony, and he gets some shots on some major properties. Because I think that we're seeing more and more nowadays, like with people like um, Daniel Warren Johnson, that with the right property, like the right IP, um, they're willing to let people sort of create their own worlds and do their own thing and have like a little bit more autonomy with how they tell stories. And that's some of the best stuff that's been put out at the moment because it's like
Mm,
singular voice, like there's an editor in that because, these are $1 million corporations. So they have like that whole structure of getting a book out to press. But yeah, it's nice to see like Trad Moore, what he did with Silver Surfer, what he did with Doctor Strange. Um, I assume he's working on something now because we haven't heard from him in a while. But yeah, um, they're almost automatic pickups for me now when I see like a creator that I'm familiar with and they're doing a book, even if it's like an independent book or if it's with a minor publisher or whatever. If I see, oh, they're writing it and they're drawing it, okay, well, I'm going to pick that up.
yeah, it's like Walt Simonson on Thor back in the day,
Mm.
and Frank Miller on Daredevil. There's something that really kills when the person can write and draw the comic at the same time,
Mm.
which must be hell when you're on a deadline, when you're in the the never-ending machine of like that sort of publishing schedule.
Well, I guess as a creator, I mean, you would know. I mean, I guess you don't have like a publishing deadline other than maybe
Mm.
self-imposed within yourself. Like, I want to have Final Dragon finished by this date, you know, rather than it being like it has to be finished by this date because we got to put it out on the shelves. But that idea of like eventually you have to turn your writer brain off, right? Like you have to go, I've written it, I'm just drawing it now. Because if I keep that other hat on, you just fall into a circle of constant edits and rewrites and things like that. Like, do
Mm.
you do you find that like you got to get to that point where you go, the writer's done, I'm not a writer anymore, and you just treat it like someone else has written the project just so you can get the pencils down and actually put it out.
Um, no, it, because the way that I do it is uh, the the story is like done, and then once I've laid out the pages, then the story is like I'm thinking about the next bit, but the dialogue for me is the hard bit because I'll rewrite the dialogue 3 or 4 times, then have a, a lettering script which is just all the dialogue, and then as I'm putting that onto the page, I'll be rewriting it as well. Like sometimes it doesn't fit on like the space in the panel that I've drawn, but there's also times when I could have worded that better, and I'll just change it on the fly, which is another luxury of doing your own stuff and when you're doing everything. Like if I was lettering it for someone else and I thought, oh, like, you could cut out you've used that word twice in the one sentence, you could cut that out or think of a better word, but you can't do that for someone else's stuff. So, and for
So you,
like in the old system or probably still the current one, once you give the script to the letterer, you kind of your hands off at that point.
You get to kind of Lee Kirby yourself. You get to plot it out, draw it, and then write the dialogue afterwards if you see, because you know what the story is going to be, obviously, as a self-published
Yeah,
creator. I suppose that's it. I suppose that's the other way to do it. I guess it's like I would be so I feel like if it was me, I feel like I'd be constantly. I feel like I would find it hard to get out of that mindset that that it had to, like it's got to be done, like when is something done, like that whole adage of like how do you
yeah.
know when it's done if you've got the
It's
ability to continually change it.
it's done once it's printed,
Yeah.
but then that's that version of it because you can mess with it for the second printing. Like for Radical #1, I'm gonna be. I think it's. I think I might have one copy left of the first print, and then um, for the second print, I'm gonna recolor it and then rescript it and reletter it, so it'll be the same art and so the same basic story, but I'm gonna fix up the like the dialogue and stuff, and also that one I got colored by Gab Melvin because I didn't know how to do coloring at the time. I was too nervous to try it for myself, and it's good coloring, but I don't think it doesn't suit that style of comic. Like it doesn't suit my artwork as much as my coloring does. So that's gonna get recolored.
Oh, so it's
Mm,
like a remastered version of
mm,
Radical Number One.
okay. So uh, we've had a look at the stuff we bought recently. Is there anything that you've been reading?
um Not comic wise, like I'm a bit of a nerd in a lot of different ways. So when I was at university, I primarily focused on early modern literature, um, with Shakespeare being a huge focus of my studies. So I'm reading a book at the moment called Shakespeare: An Ungentle Life, and it is using all this sort of contextual evidence that does exist for what we know about Shakespeare, what his life was, or what people's lives. Because even though we don't necessarily have like a ton of information about his life, we have enough information about the lives of people who lived very parallel to him. So there's this author has sort of taken all this contextual information and tried to construct, okay, based on everything we know about what it was like to live in the mid 16th century, what these people's lives were like, in the area where he came from, etc. Like, can we reconstruct a somewhat accurate idea of what his life would have looked like from pretty much when he is born, sort of disappears from public record for quite a long time, and then shows up again in legal papers and stuff like that. Um, so it's pretty fascinating. Like it is, it's an academic read, so it's not like uh,
Mm,
a
like a
like
narrative.
a, it's not a narrative. Yeah, so it's more like a historical. Uh, like it's all facts. It's all referencing other books and articles and whatnot, and talking about a lot of things about courtiers and legal records and things like that that most people probably wouldn't find terribly interesting. Um, but it's very fascinating if you're trying to construct an idea of what, you know, probably the most legendary storyteller who's ever lived, what his life was actually like as a living person who was outside of the context of his work, like what was going on at the time when these things were written, how would those affected an individual, um, sort of humanizing the work a bit to say, this is a man, this is what his life was like, and this is what he wrote because of that. Um, and I'm very excited because I read, who was it? There is a big name, I can't remember who it was, but there's a little pop up um, offshoot publisher that is going to be doing some comic adaptations of Shakespeare's work. Um, so I think Macbeth is the first book that they're tackling. So they're doing it in like I don't know how many issues they're doing in like a one particular play or whatever, but um, they're sort of putting some really nice teams of writers and artists together, and then they're going to do comic book adaptation versions of these plays. Um, I don't know if they're changing. Will probably crack open Medusa.
I pressed a button and I lost the TV. Okay, I think it's back now. Yeah.
Okay,
You was the audio was still going, but I went to a different screen.
okay. Well, it's what I was saying that was more important than what I was doing. I was
Hmm.
just, I was entertaining myself with a whole bunch of boring talk about Shakespeare. Um, but yeah, every time, you know, every time I go back and I read one of those early modern plays or something like that, as someone who studied them, it's so much more evident that so much of what has become like just classic storytelling tropes all comes from those places. I mean, it goes back even further to like um, ancient Greek theatre and whatnot.
Mm.
But yeah, it's fascinating. I love it. I love that storytelling and all these different elements, like whether it's plays, play scripts, historical reenactment, mythology, which gets then changed and modified over time. Um, yeah, I kind of I love it. I love that. I mean, that's why we read these things, right? This is why we also do these shows where we get to talk about it. It's because it's all about providing context and finding context within like narrative storytelling. So um, I'm kind of all about anything that fills in those gaps. Um, I was talking about Dave Cockrum on
Mm.
this book. There's also a great book out called The Life and Art of Dave Cockrum, um, which, again, it fills in the gaps of the human being who wrote X-Men, who wrote Futurians, and you know all these fantastic books. But then it gives. I love learning the why. You know, so yeah, I find myself digging into those things just as deeply as I'm digging into the comics and stuff like that. Maybe it's because I'm getting older and I'm like, you know, getting into that phase of like, I need to understand the human condition. But yeah, I love all that stuff now.
That's cool. Is there how many of the plays are they gonna translate to comics?
I mean, I assume they'll do like the the big ones. Like I wish I could remember more details, but I imagine they'll probably do like Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth. Um, I mean, they might get weird and do like Midsummer Night's Dream, but I'm not sure how that would go. Um, I mean, I love Merchant of Venice. I think that would be a fun one to do. But like, I don't know, like parts of it are quite anti-Semitic, so
Mm,
it's. I think that provided they explain, like they either change things around because I don't mind adapting and changing to make things more palatable. That's perfectly fine. Times it's certainly different environment now than it was 500 years ago, but at the same time, it's a classic text, so it's like as long as you contextualize, man, like as long as you go, you know, these views are what they are. It's just a 500-year-old piece of literature. Like you probably can get away with not really changing some of the even, you know, shady aspects of some of these stories. But that's equally problematic with some of the Marvel comics that were coming out in like the 1960s. There's some content that was published in some of those early
mm.
comics where you would never get away with publishing it today. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see like how deep they want to go and what they want to change and what they feel like they need to change, if anything.
And it's cool. So, basically, all I read in the past recent couple of weeks was the Wetworks books, and I've also been reading the GI Joes from the early 80s, the Marvel ones. So I got the big omnibus. It's about that big, so 50 issues. I'm about maybe 15 issues in, and they're really good.
Is that the
So,
Larry Hama written stuff?
yeah, so it's more like a war story, uh, espionage kind of thing, but with a supervillain, like a comic book supervillain as the antagonist. So it's quite interesting. There's a lot of jumpy art in the early issues, which is really good.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think an artist who um, most of my like I think all the best stuff they ever did wasn't the Hulk. You know, yeah, and the Hulk is the stuff that Herb Trimpe is most remembered for.
Mm. But you got to think that the more comics you do, the better you're going to get at it. So by the 80s, it's going to be 20 years better than the stuff he was doing in the 60s and stuff.
Mm.
I remember when I was reading the Transformers, like collected editions, they reprinted the early the Transformers versus G.I. Joe's comics and had Drew wrote them. I mean, drew them, and he was really bad at drawing the robots because that style of like Japanese robot hadn't really kind of got into the mainstream Americans. And he's an older guy, so he wouldn't be like watching the cartoons or anything like that. But there was one scene where I think it's the Baroness or someone. There's two people just sitting in an outdoor restaurant, and the way he drew just a talking heads page, the different camera angles and stuff. It's the best couple pages in the whole thing. Was just two people talking at a cafe. It's really interesting. Like that's it's like, oh, that's I know how to do this stuff, and that's how you know uh, he was able to like really show off his stuff was just drawing two people having a conversation.
Transformers comics are so funny too because you talk to any of those sort of either the older creators or the ones who are starting to get older now. Like I remember having a conversation with Barry Kitson, and
Mm,
Barry Kitson got his start with Marvel UK doing Transformer comics
okay.
in England, and he doesn't even like to look at them. these days. He's like, I was so bad at drawing Transformers. And now it's all like these fantastic, I mean, not singularly, but there's a lot of like fantastic, like people who have cut their teeth on like mecha anime and stuff like that from
Mm.
like Singapore and Malaysia and Indonesia and China and Japan, all doing fantastic work on um, Transformers comics. So yeah, it's cool.
And then was it Dreamwave, the guys who did the Transformers comics in the early 2000s? Like they really upped the game of how to draw Transformers. Like people still draw them like that now. Like they became the standard of how to draw like the Transformers.
Well, then to bring it around, another name we mentioned tonight, Daniel Warren Johnson, like his
Mm.
take on Transformers, um, he brought like a dynamic energy to it, but he's also a guy who he grew up and cut his teeth on like all those properties that I was just mentioning. So all that mecha anime and all that sort of stuff is what inspired him to take on and do that book.
Yeah, the very first Marvel Transformers, there's a big like double splash page, and it's got all the Transformers like standing around it, like having a big like conversation about something. But they've drawn the toys, and you know how like the old toys are like bricks and put them that he's not transformed, but he gets they're gonna keep like his legs don't move. They just
Yeah.
so they kind of like that. So they've given them the like the model sheets or not just a like a pamphlet or something or just photos of the toys. And so they've just drawn the toys, which is interesting. We've got Nathan's in the chat. He say, "Yo, let's go." And he says, "The Max, please." I'm gonna have to do
And
a pre-read next.
we did get some great Bill Sienkiewicz covers
Yeah,
with those Transformers issues as well. So they're pretty iconic nowadays too.
they he did the first issue. I just recently got a copy of the Elf comic book that he did the cover for, which is crazy. Yeah, Elf's
His
one of my
art,
favorite TV shows.
I remember Alf. I can't remember when it was on. It was on like this is when. Remember when like before all everything got amalgamated, like Optus and Foxtel were like two completely different independent things. They both had their own cable TV services, and they all had different channels, and they all showed different shows and stuff like that. Like we always had like Optus, not Foxtel, and um, one of the stations, like the one that showed like all the classic TV shows at the time, like would show Alf in like the like mid afternoon. So even like though Alf was like a little bit before me, like I would, or it was like it was finishing up when I was very young. So by the time I was like in the later years of like primary school and into like early high school and stuff like that, um, I'd be able to come home and at like 4:30 something like that, there would always be an episode of Alf on, and so that was my experience. I watched a lot of Alf. I even for a good long time I was obsessed with that terrible movie that they did, Project Alf, as well.
Yeah,
Where
it's weird.
where he
I'm not sure I'd seen it
escapes.
the whole way through.
So he escapes from anyone who hasn't seen it, like escapes from a government research facility, and it sort of turns into a bit of a road trip chase movie. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I haven't seen it then.
it's um it's very dumb, and if you haven't seen it for like 25 years, trust me, it is not as good as you remember it.
Is that the one at the start where he's in the base and he's doing shtick with the like one of the people that works there? And
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
just it's odd. Like they I think the person who's doing well is a comedian, but it doesn't feel like anything's landing. Like, yeah,
And I think the guy who plays the this is how their budget must have been at the time. Like I think the guy who plays like the agent that helps him like escape is actually the guy who does the voice of Alf. Like so they're like I think they're even like double dipping on the roles there. So
yeah,
I think they got him like doing both things.
that's interesting. This is Paul Fusco, the, the guy that did it, I think.
And then I think when they did this movie, it had changed. I think that someone else had taken over the voice at that point. I think maybe.
Yeah,
Um, I could be wrong. I could be making all of this up. I don't even know anymore. But I feel like that's correct.
I think I remember reading or hearing somewhere that the movie after the series got cancelled, and then they made the movie, try to make it like a backdoor pilot for another series, but obviously didn't go because by the sounds of it, the movie's not that great.
I mean, I remember loving it, but I was also like very young. Like, there's this other, um, you know how everyone's got this movie, right? Everyone's got a movie that they watched when they were like 10 that no one can convince you it's bad. It doesn't matter how many times you see it. It doesn't matter how low its score is on like review websites. Like to you, that movie's like just cemented in the brain somewhere. To me, there's a movie. It's called The Invisible Kid, and it stars Jay Underwood. And Jay Underwood would later go on to play Johnny Storm in the Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie.
Okay.
So it's just terrible. I actually watched it like 3 weeks ago. It's this terrible sort of like coming of age uh, family movie about this guy whose like dad was like a wacko scientist, and then he accidentally invents this powder that makes you turn invisible, and so hijinks then ensue because people try to like steal this formula and whatnot. Um, but I watched it again about 3 weeks ago, and it's one of the it's one of those movies for me. It's like you can I will never not enjoy this movie even though it is absolutely atrocious. And I feel like that's the same ballpark as Project Alf. And so many of those, before the show started, we were briefly talking about 90s American Kung Fu action movies and Final Dragon and the inspirations for that and whatnot. Um, the Double Dragon movie from like
Oh yeah.
1994 with like Scott Wolf and
Mm.
Mark Dacascos. Again, cannot convince me that movie is as bad as it is still good.
Yeah, I didn't see that till I was in my 30s. They're not a big fan of that one.
See the shine of youth has been
Mm.
removed by that point. So um, yeah,
Well, on that note, we might wrap up the first episode of Comics Are Rad. So big thanks to Ryan for coming on and having a chat about comics
been a
and
pleasure.
getting to chat. And thanks to everyone who watches the one afterwards. So we should be back next week. I'll be doing the Sunday drawing stream, Sunday at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. You can check me out at Ecclesia on Instagram and on Patreon. And Ryan, have you got anything else to plug?
Only if you are in the Brisbane area and you want something to do this Friday and Saturday night, um, head to anywhere.is and grab yourself some tickets to see Bawdy Tales and Critical Fails, a role play adventure. It is playing at North Lakes Community Centre this Friday and Saturday, and then on Friday the 16th. And look out for our dates at the Brisbane Festival because we'll be there as well.
Awesome.